So, since establishment from its own side means self-instituting, now I did something here that I usually don't do that I don't do outside of popular translations. In popular translations, I'll use many words for a single Tibetan word, even when it means the same thing. For instance, afflictive emotions, I'll translate as problematic emotions. And I gave a talk at Emory in which I listed some 20 different words that I'll use in His Holiness's teachings for the one term afflictive emotions. Just so the translations won't become boring, or because they'll be more lively. In this one case here, the word self-instituting at the end in a slightly different form is translated as able to set itself up. In the first one, it's tsuktuk, and later on in the sentence, it's tsuktuk truba. So established, of course, has to be added to it, but established as able to set itself up. So I give a variety of translation here because I thought that the less formal, perhaps, translation, self-instituting, means the same thing as able to set itself up. Tsuk means set itself up, establish itself, get itself going. And so the somewhat formal term is self-instituting. And tsuktuk means wrong tsuktuk. There's a non-expressed wrong here. Set itself up. Things appear to us as if they are able to set themselves up. It's a great term. So, self-instituting. And it's a bit too formal for my style. And so, I hit upon able to set itself up. You know, those of you who are around when the building that Jorian Ashravasti was being built, you know that that building was not able to set itself up. But people who come to see it, they just sort of see it as if it's there in and of itself. And you could say something to them, you don't know how much work went into this. Almost as if you have to pound it into them. And some of them might say, oh yeah, I remember what it was like to build my place. And others might just stand there as if, why are you trying to pound this into me? Or you can't pound that into me. Nothing seems to get into them. And it looks as if you're trying to show off or what, And it's like, don't bother me with history. Or I hate history. Whereas others would like to know the history. Tell me more. And like to get into the detail. And actually, when you go into the detail and and think about the causes and conditions, that will in fact impact how you originally saw it. How you originally saw it as self-instituting. So Tsong-kha-pa says, I think in his illumination of the thought of Chandrakirti's supplement to Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle, that those who bring over predispositions for emptiness based on the teaching of causes and conditions, as soon as they hear about causes and conditions, will have an impact against how things appear. Against how things appear. And will be drawn into reflections on emptiness. When their predispositions are that thorough. So, what I did here was to put a note on the two appearances of Tsuk-tuk and left it to the reader to notice that I used two different translations in the same sentence. Just because I was so, I was unwilling to drop both of these fantastic translations, which is something that I don't normally do, even if I am enthralled by, like counterproductive emotions rather than afflictive emotions, or messy emotions, right? Because that's what afflictive means. It means messy. Makes a mess of your mind. Even though I am enthralled by the brilliance of my different translations, I won't let them interfere in these more formal translations where the usage of single translations when it means the same thing. Sometimes the same word doesn't mean the same thing. I won't stray from using the same word because using the same word develops the environment and is very helpful. At least that's my choice. Some people may say, well, this guy is very stilted, which is Sidney Piper of Snow Lion at first said, your translations are very wooden. And then later said, stay with the wooden. It's really helpful. He didn't put it that way, but that's what he meant. So since establishment from its own side, that this is the richness of the terminology and not always using the same term for these words that are different in Tibetan. What does establishment from its own side mean? It means from the object side, as opposed, as Ngawang Lingden used to say. Well, in the video, Ngawang Lingden is appearing over here on this side, along with Kizan Sambo. As Ngawang Lingden used to say, from the object side, as opposed to from the subject side. From its own side, from the object's own side. Even if you're talking about consciousness, the consciousness seems to exist from its own side. When you think about that, the consciousness itself seems to exist from its own side. And the object seems to exist from its own side. So when you take consciousness as the object, it seems to exist in and of itself. And so what does the establishment from its own side mean? It means it's self-instituting. It seems to be self-instituting, able to institute itself. What does that mean? Able to set itself up. So in this case, the different translator is the same guy. why I like to take advantage of different translators' terms and not put down other translators' terms. The meaning of emptiness of inherent existence is to be taken as, so the emptiness of that, so inherent existence, existing inherently in the thing. People used to say and still say own being. It has its own being. Is to be taken as non-establishment, as able to set itself up. Non-establishment as self-instituting. Okay? If I had kept the self, the same term, as able to be self-instituting, perhaps. Able to set itself up. The richness of the terminology. So, in the four modes of translation, Tsik-yor, translating the term, literal translation. Teng-yor, translating the meaning. When translating the term, the literal translation doesn't work, you can turn to the meaning. Translating the meaning. Teng-yor, translating it in the order of the term. If you're using Sanskrit or Tibetan, translating it in the flow of the term itself. Or Lok-yor, opposite order. So, I suppose you could have literal translation that is in the forward order and in the opposite order. Or meaning translation that's in the forward order or opposite order. Now, with the meaning translation, I actually never thought out this aspect of it. Usually would take that to mean the definition. You know, taking the translation from the definition, but you could take it as from the etymology. You'd have, I guess, two choices there. Now only they used to, I believe, used to speak about it, I don't want to say that, only from the point of view of the definition, but maybe he also took it as from the point of view of the etymology. And within etymologies, there are etymologies that are creative. Like, creative would be like, if you took my name, J is for joyous, E is for efficient, F is for foolish. I mean, sorry, F is for I can't come up with anything but foolish. Okay?
Funny.
And so often it's something more than just one, J is for, I can't come up with it.
Joyous effort.
Huh?
Joyous effort.
Your joyous effort? Well, you're just putting the two together. But J.E. may come up with a word that begins with J.E.
Jesus.
Tsong-kha-pa.
Okay, I'll take that.
Jewish.
Now, he turns to, so this is Tsong-kha-pa. Remember, this is the statement earlier, solely from Tsong-kha-pa, but now interspersed with commentary interlaced with commentary by Dati Geshe Rinchen Tundru, the Sarah Che scholar, and without it being clearly marked what is from him and what is from Tsong-kha-pa. But you can compare it to what was said earlier under item number 7. However, if you took the meaning of own power here as only, as merely, not conditioned on other causes and conditions. Now, I mentioned earlier, if you understood the full impact of not conditioned on other causes and conditions, according to the consequence school, then you would understand contingent on other causes and conditions, contingent on other causes and conditions, as opposing the way things appear as inherently existent. But what Tsong-kha-pa is referring to here, I don't need to shout. Like, there's a joke in Taiwan that when old people speak into telephones, smartphones, they shout. Because they think that when you speak into a telephone, you have to shout. It's quite interesting that even old people nowadays think you have to shout into a phone. It's like in my grandfather's house, we had to crank up the phone. And you would shout like hell into the telephone. So maybe that's what I think I have to do when I'm talking into a microphone to people who are far away. You're right here in front of me. That's pretty funny. There was one Lama staying with us out in Wisconsin, and he was talking to somebody on the telephone who was clearly telling him that what he was saying to him was secret, and he was new to talking on telephones, an old guy, and so he was shouting into the telephone, saying he would keep it secret. And you could tell by the way, I could tell by the way he was talking into the telephone, that he thought that the telephone was absorbing everything he said, even though he was shouting. Now I'm falling into that. So, however, Tsong-kha-pa's meaning of contingent on other causes and conditions is the what would minimally satisfy contingent on causes and conditions, that is validly known by valid cognition. For instance, do proponents of sutra understand, lower systems other than the consequence school, or right down to the Great Exposition School, Sutra School, Mind-Only School, Autonomy School, do they understand with valid cognition dependence, contingency on other causes and conditions? Do they understand dependence on causes and conditions? And you have to answer yes. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand basic karma. They wouldn't understand production of a pot by a potter, and dependence of a pot on clay, on molding, on craft. They wouldn't understand craftsmanship, etc. So, what Tsong-kha-pa is talking about here on dependence on other causes and conditions is what minimally satisfies understanding dependence on causes and conditions by valid cognition. And so, own power, when one says things don't have their own power, if you took this in the minimal sense of not dependent on the other causes and conditions, and said that we consequentialists are refuting that what is under its own power is, we're refuting that what is under its own power and thereupon you refuted that what is under its own power is contingent on causes and conditions, then this would already be established for all of the lower schools. So we have to have some deeper meaning of what contingent on causes and conditions is for the consequence school. And this has to be what Aryadeva and Chandrakirti are talking about. It has to be something deeper than the minimal meaning of depending on causes and conditions, like what I was talking about earlier. A meaning that would be sufficient to contradict how things seem to appear to exist from their own side. So that's why he says, and since it cannot be posited that the middle view has been found through even the mere refutation of being dependent on causes and conditions, own power should be understood as a mode of abiding, a mode of existing or abiding, able to set itself up by way of its own entity right with the object. In other words, a deeper meaning, a deeper type of mode of abiding. So, you get the next sentence also. Emptiness of inherent existence is to be taken as a voidness of an entity under its own power. So then he wants to refine this. This doesn't mean a nothing. Now what's a no thing? What would a no thing? A no thing might mean it's unable to perform a function. Because as Dharmakirti says, what's the definition of a thing? A noble, a bhava. It's something that's able to perform a function. And so Tsong-kha-pa is saying that's not what we're talking about. We're not refuting that things can perform functions. And so because this isn't what we're saying, we're not saying that this means no things. We're not saying that this means no ability to perform a function. So, therefore, dependent arising can be used as the reason for refuting that objects exist by way of their own nature, from their own side. So in the last sentence of this quote from Chandrakirti's commentary on Arya Davis 400, he's very clear in the but clause. Remember, as I said, His Holiness said to me, when you study emptiness, there are a whole lot of buts, which sounds risque, but it means B-U-T. Which in Tibetan is Ende. There's a whole lot of Endes, which is a literary way of Ende. Ende. Ende means but. Ende. Yin-yang. He didn't say yin-yang, he said Ende. But it does not mean that all compounded things are utterly without the thingness of performing functions. So a lot of people want to say that Chandrakirti says, that there's no performance of function. There are no things. That is truly agnostic about the performance of functions. And they just haven't read Chandrakirti closely. Fortunately for us, Tsong-kha-pa read him closely. Really, I mean, it's not only this, but also the view that inherently established things exist is just an erroneous view. Because such inherent establishment does not exist in any phenomena. That means including emptiness. So early on, we had the discussion about the term kulsa. Kul means deviate, go astray. Kulsa means place of going astray. And as Venerable nicely pointed out, the places of going astray are the two extremes. The two extremes are like cliffs that you can fall from. And I was not satisfied with my translation of the term kulsa as pitfalls, because this suggests these two cliffs that you can fall from. Whereas the more literal, I was dissatisfied with my translation of kulsa as pitfalls, because this is places of deviation or places of going astray. It's not bringing up the metaphor of the two cliffs. The places of going astray are the two extremes. There's no question. And a metaphor that's used is of these two, you have the middle, and there's two cliffs on either side, and if you fall from them, when you fall from a cliff, you're in a mess. You're hurt. And my usage of the term pitfalls suggests that kulsa is a reference to these cliffs. No. Because as you know, I like to translate terms as they are. Places of deviation, places of going astray. Sa means place. Earth, place, places of going astray. One translator looked in the dictionary again, this online dictionary. Somebody used sidetracks. That's not bad, but it's not that literal. It's a good translation because it gives you the idea. Sidetracks. But literal translation with the opposite, using not forward translation but backwards translation, but literal, is places of going astray, places of deviation, where you get led out to going off the track. Now the problem with middle and cliffs, metaphors usually get you into problems. That if you're in the middle, if you are in the middle, there are no cliffs. There are no cliffs. There's only middle forever. If you had a choice, if it were a matter of middle and extremes, then you have a middle area and cliffs on the sides. Now, how wide that middle is, if you really want to work on how big to make the middle in this metaphor, who knows? But you see, once you've found the middle, and you're firm in it, you're steadfast, there are no cliffs. It would be the golden middle. The golden middle has no cliffs. It's interesting. In other words, the metaphors only go about so far. So Venerable's point that the places of going astray are no question are the two extremes. Deprecation and superimposition. Therefore, number 8, how an emptiness of things' capacity to perform functions is unsuitable. And you might say, duh, didn't you just say that? Right? Mm-hmm. In this way, which is good in this way, immediately after that passage, Chandrakirti's commentary in 400 says, so Karen Lang has put tremendous amount of her time into translating Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400. So, second line, dependently arisen things, that is substrata, technical term. Substrata just means the things you're considering entities. And their causes within the class of cyclic existence, which are the thoroughly afflicted. So how many things are in the class of the thoroughly afflicted?
53.
You know,
53. The pure has more. 55 and 53 with the pure coming out ahead.
Yeah. Is that how it is? I don't remember myself.
We'll have to look it up again, but
yeah.
They're going to check.
Should say I wrote the book, but that's sort of stupid. I translated the list, I should say. Okay. Among the many translators. Where else can you find the list? Except in the book. 53 and 58 or 58 and 53? I think you made a good choice. You had a choice of You had a 50% chance of being right.
55.
55 and 53 adds up to 108.
Yeah.
Did I find it? She's looking.
Out of the 108 phenomena that are the
Song. 55
Dogon.
class,
Yeah.
53
Yep.
the
55 in the
Huh?
pure. 55 in the pure. They win.
they win 55.
Yeah, U.S. soccer team.
Nice way to remember.
So 55. So these are the 108 phenomena. I wonder if there really are only 108 phenomena that are the bases of commentary in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. We ought to go through and count them. Can you imagine going through and counting them? Well, what would you start with? 100,000 so-called stanza Perfection of Wisdom Sutra? That if it were written in stanzas, it would take it would be as long as if it were written in stanzas, 100,000 stanzas. Oh, let's not start that project. And causes within the classes, and within liberation or the very pure, which are then 55. 55 classes,
Yeah. Not phenomena.
which get broken down into a whole lot of things,
Jeffrey.
which are compatible causes, which are like illusions. Like illusions, it's not that they are illusions, in that they appear one way and exist another way. Illusions appear to be the actual things but aren't, whereas like illusions means they appear to be inherently existent but are not. They appear to be, well, it says it right here, they're empty. View of thingness. Now, thingness here means thingness of inherent existence. Thingness up above men, the thingness of able to perform a function. So two different types of thingness is erroneous. So now, why is one of these views called permanence? This is really beautiful. Since inherently existent produced things could not be made to disintegrate by anything. If something is produced and is inherently existent, it couldn't disintegrate and therefore would be permanent. I want to say, isn't that cute? They made up a reason why the impermanent would have to be permanent if it were inherently existent. The impermanent would have to be permanent if it were inherently existent. And therefore, that's a reason why the inherent existence of produced things is called an extreme of permanence. I want to call that cute. I mean, it's almost tricky. Nothing could make it disintegrate. If this cup, which was produced, were inherently existent, nothing could destroy it. Nothing could make it really be impermanent. I don't know, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? Doesn't it kind of have a tricky, isn't that a tricky, aren't they tricking us into thinking that's why it's called an extreme of permanence? I mean, you have to say, yeah, that's true. And then the extreme of annihilation, since if inherently existent things were to disintegrate upon having been produced, their continuums would be utterly severed. And that's why why most people think, if I died and really died, I couldn't be reborn. If I really died. Because I inherently exist. So if I really died, there's no way I could be reborn. But still, if you had to debate it, who could deny it? So you'd have to be utterly wiped out. Oh my gosh. But you really have to soak that in. I think if you're going to soak it in, you have to face that it appears to be tricky. Or at least I do. I find it hard to yank the wool off my eyes. But that is the thickness in which we exist. I exist. The way illusion-like dependent arising, devoid of permanence and annihilation, devoid of solidly existent, produced things, and the disintegration of solidly existent things. Wonder if that helps. So we have to understand that there's no contradiction between an utter absence of inherent existence, and there being illusion-like dependent arisings. That's really important. Really, really important. So the word pitfalls, what's going to be best? Places of deviation, places of strain. Germano likes the word strain, but he uses that, I believe, for trulwa, mistake. But I can use strain here. Places of strain, deviation. Deviation is used so much for sexual deviation nowadays. What do you prefer? Places of deviation, places of strain?
Deviation.
Places of sidetracking?
Could you stretch it to places of going astray?
Places of going astray, that's good. I like that. Called an extreme of annihilation, that impermanent Tibetan risings do not perform the function of creating effects, for it is a deprecation of something that exists. The second is the view of inherent existence, called an extreme of permanence, for it is an exaggeration, because an inherent existence never did or will occur in anything. And thus the apprehension of inherent existence is an extreme of superimposition. See, my emphasis tends to go on what's being said here, even if I find something tricky in the usage of the word permanence and annihilation. And I use His Holiness's suggestion at Harvard that the tricky one above may be food for thought, and put my emphasis down here with these very evocative, terms: superimposition, exaggeration, deprecation, perform the function of creating effects. I was reading backwards. The correct view being sought is a combination of a complete lack of inherent existence within the scope of Tibetan rising. Oh, this is Hopkins talking, finally. No wonder I like it so much. There is not the slightest paradox. Yeah, that's Hopkins. But, lack of contradiction. In seeing that all phenomena ranging from the thoroughly afflicted to the very pure are both, that's the combination of both, dependently established and not established from their own side. Now, Hopkins gives an advertisement for the next chapter, which is as I said quite some time ago, a few months ago, I said we're going to skip, because we read it,
But maybe we just skip the part about the etymology, because there's these really good quotes at the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, actually. I didn't think we could skip the etymology, which I think is a great idea. And that's the part where we got totally tangled up. I think your suggestion is good. Would you inform us of how to do that?
Yeah,
Just, the page numbers?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're great quotes. And is it just before the etymology?
It's before.
Or,
It's before. Yep, it's sectioned off before, and then you get into etymology as a separate thing. And then I think it goes back a little. I have to look at the end again.
yeah, look at the end and tell us if we should be reading I think we should be reading the end. It's my guess, but maybe not. It's both etymology, perhaps, and formation of the Sanskrit.
Yeah.
The formation of the Sanskrit's a killer.
Yeah.
And that's when we stopped reading it after we read that. Thought like, oh my God, or oh Jesus. Oh Jesus, give me a break. Yeah, that's an excellent recommendation. I was only bemoaning this morning. Oh, there's some good stuff at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I was too tired to come up with a conclusion of what to do. Thank you. Yeah, so pass that around and all right, have we gone over? No, that's good. So we can stop while we're still brilliantly fresh.